The ballet mom blocked me from reaching my screaming injured daughter, then told the cop I grabbed her child. When I begged her to stop lying, she tilted her head and said, "Sometimes you have to exaggerate to protect kids." I stayed silent. That was 6 months ago. Last week, she walked into court, heard her own voice on a recording, and couldn't speak for the rest of the day. They called the cops on me and claimed I was creeping on their little girls. You see, my daughter decided to try ballet 6 months ago, and with my wife being deployed overseas, I was the one to bring her to the academy. The first time we went, I felt eyes on me like never before. I was the only dad there, and within seconds heard whispers about how I was potentially dangerous. During the lesson, a mom approached me. No introduction, no hi hello, just, "It's strange that a man wants to be here surrounded by little girls." I immediately understood why the other dads waited in the parking lot. I tried to tell her I was just here to watch my daughter. But how can we be sure? The women here, we don't feel safe with you watching. I felt my blood boiling. But getting in an argument on day one might lead to my daughter getting kicked out. So I gave a sarcastic sure and moved to the corner where I could barely see the practice floor. But that wasn't enough. "That's exactly the angle a creep would pick," a different woman said during my daughter's second practice. I tried to just ignore them this time, but she literally paused the entire rehearsal. She stood up, waved her hand, and started shouting, "Excuse me," in that signature pitch-perfect Karen tone. The instructor walked over. "I saw him recording our daughters." The woman pointed at me. I literally did a double take. My phone is one of those Nokia bricks that takes 240p photos at sloth speed, and it was in my pocket the whole time. I pulled out my Nokia brick to show the instructor, but she didn't even look at it. She outright said, "What's important is not whether or not I actually did it." Sorry, ma'am. What? But that these women clearly feel unsafe with me being here. She told me I would have to wait somewhere else during practices, or she'd have to call the police for recording minors. I remember looking over and seeing my daughter go red. I was so embarrassed for putting her through this. Part of me contemplated just crashing out, but then I'd look insane. And because my daughter's dreams mattered more than anything, and the nearest other academy was 2 hours away, I complied. For weeks, I sat upstairs in the ballet history room where I couldn't see the practice floor. I could have waited in my car, but I wanted to be there so if anything went wrong, I could at least hear it, and then it did. It was 65 minutes into the session when I heard this loud crack followed by a scream, my daughter's scream. This wasn't a normal kid cry either, the kind of cry that makes any parent's stomach drop and face go pale. I flew down those stairs quicker than I thought possible. Then I saw my daughter on the floor, crying in pain, her ankle bent the wrong way at a 90-degree angle, screaming hoarse. That's when I did what got me into this whole mess. I rushed over to help my daughter, or at least tried, because 3 moms literally formed a wall at the dance floor entrance. "We're sorry about your daughter, but we're not letting a creep near our children." I wasn't even listening to them this time, just pushed past them. Not hard, just enough to get through. The gasps from everyone were theatrical. I dropped beside my daughter. I started examining her ankle, keeping her still, calling 911. She was begging me to make the pain stop. I heard the moms actually yelling at the instructor telling them to get this creep off the floor and threatening to pull their daughters out. Then this little girl, maybe 7, walked over and knelt down. She wiped my daughter's tears. From what I knew, this girl was her best friend here. I touched the girl's shoulder and said, "Thank you, sweetheart." The moms lost their minds immediately. More gasps, whispers. Then I heard one of them. 911? Yes, we have an emergency. Still, I was too preoccupied to care. The ambulance and police arrived at the same time, 10 minutes later. I was climbing into the ambulance with my daughter when an officer tapped my shoulder from behind. The moms were all screaming over each other. "He's a creep! He just assaulted me. He's been recording our daughters for weeks. He just grabbed that little girl." My daughter yelled at everyone, "My daddy is innocent!" But no one listened. I took her hand and told her I'd be right there with her. She nodded and wiped her tears. But then I turned around, and the cop's whole demeanor changed. I saw his face go from sympathetic to almost disgusted when he saw my brown skin. His voice went from unsure to judgmental in a second. "Sir, from what these women are telling me, I'm going to need you to come to the station. Daddy needs to come with me." My daughter yelled at the cop. He looked past me and at her as if he knew what she needed better than we did. I tried to explain myself, but every word I said was interrupted by the moms. When the officer checked my Nokia and found nothing, he sighed. "Still need to talk to you." He cuffed me as the ambulance doors started closing. "No, don't take my daddy." My daughter tried to get out of her gurney, but pain shot through her and she grabbed her foot. Her hand was still stretched out, extending to where mine should have been when the medics closed the door. Officer's orders. Without another word, the officer turned me around and put me in handcuffs. The mother of the girl who'd hugged my daughter was pressing charges. In the police car, the officer was talking about 15 years in prison, all while the hospital was calling my number repeatedly. When I got to the station, the woman pressing charges was already there. Even worse, her victim's advocate had already arrived. She was comforting her in the lobby, very publicly, while I was led past in cuffs. Everyone stared. I was already convicted in their eyes. The booking process took forever. Fingerprints and photos and forms, while my phone kept buzzing with hospital calls I couldn't answer. They put me in a small gray room with a metal table and 2 chairs, and Detective Porter walked in carrying a manila folder that looked way too thick for something that just happened. He sat down across from me and started pulling out papers, screenshots from some group chat where the ballet moms called me things like the predator dad and that creep who watches our girls. My stomach turned reading their messages from weeks ago, planning how to get me banned, sharing photos of me sitting in the corner during practice. Porter tapped his pen on Karen's written statement, where she claimed I violently shoved her when I was just trying to get to Lily. He said 3 other moms backed up her story about assault. The victim's advocate knocked and came in with more papers, statements from moms saying I'd been lurking and making them uncomfortable for months. I kept trying to explain, but Porter just kept reading more accusations, and my phone wouldn't stop buzzing with the hospital trying to reach me about Lily's surgery. 3 hours passed like this, him showing me evidence that was just twisted versions of me being a dad, when I heard shouting from the lobby. Through the little window in the door, I could see my sister Angela arguing with the desk sergeant, waving her phone around, showing something on the screen. She'd driven all the way from New Haven after my one phone call, and now she was yelling about how they couldn't hold a military spouse while his kid was in surgery. Porter left to deal with the noise, and came back with a young woman in a suit. The prosecutor, who kept calling this a child predator case, even though we all knew that was garbage. She went through the charges one by one: assault, harassment, suspicion of recording minors, each word making it harder for me to breathe. Angela managed to text me that Lily went into surgery crying for me, asking why Daddy wasn't there, and my hands shook so bad I could barely sign the papers acknowledging the charges. They moved me to a holding cell around hour 6, just a concrete box with a bench and a toilet, and I sat there going over every ballet class, every moment, trying to figure out what I could have done different. The other guys in the cells around me kept their distance when word got around I was the ballet dad. Even they could tell this was messed up. I thought about calling my wife on her ship, but couldn't face telling her I'd failed to protect our daughter while she was serving our country. Angela finally convinced them to let her see me for 5 minutes, pressing her face against the bars telling me Lily's surgery went okay, but she was hysterical, wouldn't let any nurses touch her, kept asking for Daddy. She showed me a video on her phone of Lily in the hospital bed saying, "Those mean mommies hurt my daddy," over and over, and Angela grabbed my hands through the bars, promising we'd fight this. Porter came back that evening with more evidence. A petition from 3 weeks ago signed by 12 moms demanding I be banned from the academy, dated way before Lily's accident. Karen had been planning this whole thing, just waiting for her chance, and it came when my daughter broke her ankle. That night in the cell was the worst, every sound reminding me of Lily, the drunk guy next door humming something that sounded like the music from her recital last month. I kept picturing her in our kitchen showing me her spins, so proud when I clapped, and now she was alone in a hospital bed because I dared to be a dad who showed up. The next morning, they brought me to court for the bail hearing, and Karen was there with 5 other moms all wearing matching pink scarves like this was some kind of show. The judge, an older woman with glasses, read through the charges while the moms whispered loud enough for everyone to hear about protecting our daughters. My public defender looked exhausted and barely tried, just asked for reasonable bail while the prosecutor called me a flight risk because my wife was military and might help me run. The judge set bail at $25,000, and Angela stood up saying she'd put her house up if she had to, while the ballet moms gasped like someone had slapped them. I'm really curious about how those moms managed to organize against him for weeks before anything even happened. They had screenshots, petitions, and photos ready to go. How did the police not question why all this evidence existed from way before the actual incident? As they processed me out, I heard Karen talking to some guy with a notepad, probably a reporter, saying the community needed to know about predators like me, and I knew my name would be in tomorrow's paper next to words that would follow me forever. The next morning, Angela drove me straight to the hospital after getting me out on bail. The security guard at the pediatric floor entrance looked at his computer screen and then back at me 3 times before holding up his hand. There was apparently a safety alert on my name that flagged me as a potential threat to minors. Angela pulled out a folder thick with papers, including my wife's power of attorney documents, and started arguing with the guard who called his supervisor, who called the floor administrator. 3 different people had to review the paperwork, while I stood there watching other parents walk right past us to see their kids. It took 45 minutes of Angela explaining that I was Lily's father, and showing them court documents proving I had every legal right to be there before they finally let me through. When I reached Lily's room, she was asleep with her foot in a cast that went all the way up to her knee and an IV drip in her tiny arm. The second I touched her hand, her eyes flew open and she started crying and reaching for me with both arms. She kept saying "Daddy" over and over while clinging to my neck so tight I could barely breathe. I held her while she shook and told her I wasn't going anywhere, even though we both knew that wasn't really up to me anymore. 2 days later, a social worker showed up for what she called a mandatory welfare check because someone had called CPS, suggesting Lily's injury might not have been accidental. She set up a recorder on the bedside table and started asking Lily questions while I sat there trying not to look angry. Lily told her exactly what happened, that she fell during practice, that I was upstairs in the ballet history room when it happened, that I only came down when I heard her scream. The social worker wrote everything down and seemed satisfied, but warned me this wouldn't be the last visit since the case was now officially open. That afternoon, Angela came to the hospital with her laptop looking sick to her stomach. She'd found a Facebook group called Fairfield Moms for Child Safety with over 200 members, and my photo posted at the top with the word predator in red letters underneath. The comments were worse than anything I could have imagined, with people saying I was a pedophile, that my wife deployed to escape me, that Lily's broken ankle was suspicious, that someone should check my computer for child porn. Someone had posted our home address with a suggestion that concerned citizens might want to keep an eye on the property. Angela started taking screenshots of everything for evidence, while I sat there feeling like I was going to throw up. The next morning, a certified letter arrived from the Ballet Academy stating I was permanently banned from the premises, and they were reviewing whether Lily could continue as a student given the safety concerns of other families. Mr. Reeves wouldn't answer my calls or respond to my emails. Angela got a text from Grace's mother saying she didn't believe any of the accusations, but couldn't speak up publicly because the other parents would turn on her daughter too. She said everyone was scared of Karen's influence in the community, and nobody wanted to risk their kid being excluded from birthday parties and playdates. On day 5, Lily started physical therapy for her ankle at the Children's Rehabilitation Center. The therapist named Jerome was nice enough, but mentioned he'd heard about our situation from another parent. Even here in a medical facility for injured kids, the story had spread and contaminated everything. Lily kept asking why other moms were pulling their kids away from her in the waiting room, and why nobody would look at us. I didn't know how to explain that sometimes adults act worse than children when they're scared of something they don't understand. That's when the prosecutor's office called to inform me they were adding a charge of endangering a minor because I had abandoned Lily by not accompanying her in the ambulance. My public defender said it was obviously ridiculous since I was literally arrested for trying to help her, but warned it made everything more complicated and increased the potential prison time to 20 years. Angela set up a meeting with a private attorney named Diane Fitzgerald, who specialized in false accusation cases. She looked through all our documentation and immediately identified the problem wasn't the law, but the narrative that had already taken hold in the community. She said we needed to change the story people were telling about me, but that would take time and money, specifically a $15,000 retainer that would wipe out my entire savings account. While I was trying trying to figure out how to pay for a lawyer, Angela got a call from Grace's mother, Jennifer, who was crying so hard she could barely talk. Karen had confronted her at school pickup and accused her of supporting a predator because Grace and Lily were still friends. She threatened to make sure Grace was excluded from every playdate and birthday party for the rest of elementary school if Jennifer didn't sign a statement supporting the accusations against me. Jennifer kept apologizing but said she couldn't let her daughter suffer for something that wasn't her fault. I tried to work from home while Lily recovered, but couldn't focus on anything when every email about quarterly reports felt meaningless compared to potentially spending 20 years in prison. Lily started having nightmares about police taking me away and would wake up screaming for me 3 or 4 times every night. She'd started wetting the bed again, which she hadn't done since she was 4, and the pediatrician said it was a trauma response to everything that had happened. I'd lie awake after getting her back to sleep, wondering if fighting this was actually making things worse for her, or if I should just accept whatever punishment they wanted to give me so she could move on with her life. 3 days later, the doorbell rang at 7 in the morning, and when I opened it, a young woman with a press badge stood there with a notebook asking if I was Noah Thompson. She said she was from the Fairfield Citizen, and that Karen Whitfield had given them an exclusive interview about how she was protecting the community from a potential predator. The reporter pushed her phone toward me, showing Karen's photo on their website with a headline calling her a brave mother standing up for children's safety. She wanted my side of the story, but Diane had already warned me that anything I said would get twisted, so I just closed the door. The article ran the next morning with my photo on page 3 taken from my work's website under the words, "Local mother stands against suspected predator," and within hours everyone in town knew my face. That same afternoon, the school called saying several parents had complained about Lily being there, and maybe homeschooling would be less disruptive for everyone involved. I told them absolutely not, since Lily loved her teacher Mrs. Peterson and had friends there, but when I picked her up that day, she was sitting alone at the lunch tables while all the other kids ate in groups 20 feet away. She didn't say anything on the drive home, but I saw her watching the other kids through the car window, and her little shoulders were shaking. 2 weeks after my arrest, Angela came to stay with us to help out, and we were making spaghetti when Lily looked up from her coloring book and asked why those mommies hated me. Angela knelt down and told her sometimes people make mistakes about other people, but the truth always comes out, and Lily nodded, saying it was like in Frozen when everyone thinks Elsa is bad, but she's really good. The next morning, Diane called to tell me Jennifer Williams Park had signed Karen's statement, saying she witnessed concerning behavior from me, even though Angela got a text from her 20 minutes later, apologizing and saying Karen threatened to ban Grace from all the birthday parties if she didn't sign. That made 4 sworn statements against me now, and Diane said this complicated our defense significantly, especially since Grace wasn't allowed to talk to Lily at school anymore. Day 18 brought the prosecutor's plea offer through my public defender, who said I should take it since it was just misdemeanor assault with no jail time, only probation and mandatory counseling. He kept saying I'd be a registered offender, but at least I'd stay out of prison, while Diane argued that pleading guilty to anything would validate their whole story, and I'd never get my life back. I had 72 hours to decide, and spent most of them staring at Lily's baby photos, wondering what kind of future she'd have with a dad who either went to prison or admitted to being dangerous around children. I refused the plea deal on day 21, and within 4 hours, Karen had organized what she called a community safety meeting at the Fairfield Community Center, with flyers showing my work photo labeled "Known Threat, Refuse to Admit Guilt," posted on every telephone pole downtown. Angela went to observe and came back pale, saying over 50 people showed up, and Karen spent an hour suggesting I might target other children now that I couldn't access the ballet academy. Diane tried subpoenaing the ballet academy's security footage from the day Lily got hurt, but Ms. Reeves claimed their system malfunctioned that exact day, which was conveniently the only day in 6 months without any recording. One parent might have caught something on their phone while recording their own kid, so Diane started calling everyone from the class individually, but most wouldn't even answer. Meanwhile, Lily's physical therapy sessions were going well, and her ankle was healing, but she'd developed this anxiety about dancing, where she'd freeze up whenever ballet came on TV. What makes Karen think organizing a safety meeting will help when she knows the truth about what really happened that day? The way she got Jennifer to sign that statement by threatening Grace's friendships shows she understands exactly what power she has over other parents. She used to love watching dance videos on YouTube, but now she'd ask me to change it, saying it reminded her of when the police took Daddy, and I'd feel this rage building in my chest that I had to swallow down because any sign of anger would just prove their point about me being dangerous. Day 22. My boss called saying they'd received concerning information about my legal situation, and while they couldn't fire me without cause, they were putting me on unpaid administrative leave pending resolution of the matter. I asked point blank if Karen had called them, and the HR manager's silence told me everything before she said they had to think about the company's reputation. Without my salary, and with Diane's legal bills piling up, I calculated we had maybe 8 weeks before I'd have to start selling things or pulling from Lily's college fund. That weekend, Angela was at the grocery store when David Whitfield approached her in the cereal aisle looking uncomfortable and mentioned that Karen had become obsessed with this whole situation, spending hours on her Facebook group calling other parents and organizing protests. He didn't say she was wrong exactly, but suggested maybe there was a misunderstanding that could be resolved if the right people talked, and Angela gave him Diane's number, though we both knew Karen would lose it if she found out her husband was talking to us. 3 days later, Diane called me with news that made my hands shake. A woman named Maria Santos had reached out to her secretly, scared but determined to help. Maria had been at the ballet studio the day Lily broke her ankle, and she'd recorded everything on her phone. She showed Diane the whole video in a coffee shop parking lot 2 towns over, where nobody would see them meeting. The footage showed me rushing toward my screaming daughter, while 3 mothers literally blocked my path with their bodies. It caught Karen standing in the background with this small smile on her face as the police arrived. Maria was shaking as she handed over a copy of the video, but said she couldn't come forward publicly yet. Her own daughter still went to the academy, and she knew what would happen if Karen found out. The next morning, the CPS investigator showed up for another visit, and my stomach dropped when she said she needed to interview Lily alone.